With the modern age of gaming, we are seeing more and more of a trend towards games getting DLC. DLC in theory should be an awesome thing as it adds even more to our favorite games. However, it seems that games often get it wrong by offering too little for too much or having systems that are pay to win in multiplayer games. Despite this, 2019 received 3 great DLC packs to some of the best platformers of the past 10 years. These are The Messenger, with its Picnic Panic expansion, Celeste, with its new Chapter 9, and Shovel Knight with an all-new campaign in King of Cards. So what made all these DLC packs so special? Let's get into it. To start, we should define what kind of DLC we're getting in these games. DLC is an umbrella term for any downloadable content in games. So it could be anything from a cosmetic item like the totally rad Mercedes cars in Mario Kart 8 and Mario Maker, to a whole new campaign like Shantae Half Genie Heroes Remixed Adventures for Risky Boots and her friends. Today's 3 all lean towards the back half of the spectrum, which is usually a preferred kind of DLC. So in this video, I'll mostly be focusing on that kind of DLC. With that out of the way, let's move on. First up is The Messenger with Picnic Panic. The content update released a little under a year after the initial game dropped. Picnic Panic adds a new mini-campaign that's available after beating the initial story. The Messenger is known for its blatant fourth wall-breaking humor from almost all of its characters. So it makes sense that it's back in full force to explain your time-hopping shenanigans to access the new stuff. While yes, Picnic Panic is technically a new campaign, it's essentially just 3 new levels. However, this isn't a downside, as it lets you get straight into the action of its fluid movement and sharp pixel art, just like the main game. Picnic Panic does a lot right, but I think what it does best is balancing the new and old concepts. For example, right away the game drops you into the starting area, where you are free to mess around with the game's mechanics. It's important to remember that the player may not have played your game since it first released, so it's good to give them time to get familiarized with the character and controls and feeling. After this, you're introduced to a fan-favorite character from the initial game, with some running jokes that bring back memories of it. Seriously, the twist that Ruxin is actually tall now is perfect. But then you're taken straight to the first level, which really isn't a level at all, but more of a new mini-game with an original boss fight. The campaign lets you get familiar with old mechanics, but still starts off with a bang of all new stuff. Old concepts with a new spin is the name of the game, and it continues to have this pattern. Some examples would be the familiar level design and themes, but new atmosphere. Returning characters, but new stories and bosses, as well as new mechanics and collectibles. At its core, the game is still The Messenger, but there are just enough new ideas to keep the adventure surprising and interesting. It feels like an extension of the main game, which is exactly what Picnic Panic is trying to do. The next DLC that released was Celeste Chapter 9. The update released about a year and a half later, but it was definitely worth the wait. Chapter 9 is just one long level, but it has a bunch of new mechanics and collectibles. The story goes that Granny has recently passed, and after missing her funeral, Madeline feels somewhat responsible. When she sees a bird, she believes it's Granny and decides to go after it through space. Chapter 9 is the shortest of the 3 content packs, but that doesn't mean anything to its quality. What I think Chapter 9 does best is how it handles Celeste's story. In the initial game of Celeste, there are 8 chapters, each with an A, B, and C side, making for a total of 24 levels. There are also a ton of strawberries and crystal hearts to collect, so there's lots to do. The base message of Celeste is that you can do it. You can climb the mountain. You can overcome your personal struggles too. So you take this message to heart and complete the A-sides, the B-sides, and then even the C-sides. You as the player have learned to push yourself and stay with things just like Madeline has. So when Chapter 9 hits you right away with the information that Granny is dead, it's crushing because it shines light on how easily things can crumble apart. Chapter 9 is easily the toughest level in the whole game, and acts as an epilogue to both the story and the gameplay. It's like the game is saying, hey, we know you've beat a bunch of these levels, let's see if you still have what it takes. Likewise, Madeline is coming back to test her perseverance. It will take a while, but if you stick with it, you'll know you've become stronger as a player forever, just like how Madeline will know she has truly overcome her inner struggles and learned to live with them, not just now, but for the rest of her life. The farewell chapter succeeds in adding more to the story in a meaningful way. Finally, there's King of Cards. It's easily the longest and most different of the 3 content packs, which makes sense given we had an over 2.5-year wait from Spectre of Torment. The Shovel Knight saga has become one of the most popular indie games of the last decade, and for good reason. The thing is loaded with content, with its 4 campaigns, and King of Cards being by far the most ambitious one yet. King of Cards isn't everyone's favorite campaign, but it does a lot right, and I think the core of why it's so good is that it's not afraid to try new things. King Knight himself controls very different to the rest of the cast and other platforming characters in general. He has his bash, which has been compared to Wario Land countless times, but he also has a spin, which activates after hitting a bashable enemy or wall. He isn't nearly as nimble as Spectre Knight, but the levels are designed with this in mind. They are shorter puzzle-like levels that really keep you engaged in the game, instead of letting you mindlessly run through. On top of all this, there's a whole new card game which is surprisingly in-depth and interesting. It keeps shaking things up with different types of cards and characters from the whole series, not to mention the all-new bosses. The campaign embraced a lighter tone, which was a good choice after Spectre of Torment's darker narrative. So in the end, it's a fantastic adventure because it keeps surprising me with its ideas and celebrating the series as a whole. A quick note to add would be the OST of all of these games. It was great before, and it's still great now, with all new pieces to add to the collection. So to sum everything up, let's look back at our starting question. What makes a good platformer content update? Well, the new content should have a balance of old and new. It's great to have all new ideas, but DLC is so exciting because it's a new addition to a game you already love. So keep in mind the saying, old dog, new tricks. It's also important to remember the story and outside details, besides the core gameplay. What separates the good from the great is all the extra polish in the character's personality and arc to make them feel like an extension of the characters people loved from the base game. If your game initially wasn't super story heavy though, then maybe don't load on a thick heavy plot for the new content. And if your game already had a complex and detailed story, you should consider continuing that trend. However, the most important point is to take risk and keep up surprises. Use these rules as a guideline, and if you have your own wacky ideas, let them in so your game can stand out. Combining all these, in 2019 received 3 fantastic DLC packs that I'm sure I'll come back to time and time again. And that's not even mentioning the price. They're all free!